Welcome to video 2 of this learning module. In the last module, we started talking about how you actually select and prioritize your audience, so who to communicate with, and we also talked about what you want to communicate. The question now becomes, how do you actually go about communicating that? So we're going to focus on something called rhetoric, and that is essentially how you communicate. So rhetoric is actually how you actualize your substance. And Andrea Lunsford, who is a professor at Stanford University, says that rhetoric is the art, practice, and study of human communication. So how do you go about putting this in action in your content? There are several different ways that one can do that. One is through credibility, and we'll talk about that. Logic, so how you persuade based on facts and arguments. Using emotion to communicate. Identification, basically how does an audience identify with you and how can you use that to your advantage. The idea of repetition and using opportune moments are all different ways you can put rhetoric in action. So we'll go through all of these. The first is credibility. How do you actually get points of credibility? The first one is through experience. So if you have a lot of it or your experience is specialized, you want to use experience as a means of demonstrating credibility. You can also demonstrate credibility through success, that you've achieved something important or you're having success now, and that success is what brings you credibility. If you have a solid reputation, if people in your community know you as having a certain characteristic, an expertise, or an offering, your reputation brings about credibility. You can have endorsements. So a credible brand or a person who says you are credible or connects with you in a credible way. So if you don't have enough credibility yourself, you can have an endorsement as a means of demonstrating credibility. A credible person is using their reputation to give you credibility. Certification, so you've achieved a certain achievement level. This could be, you're a member of the Better Business Bureau, you have a certain amount of percentage, you are rated on Yelp and people love you on Yelp as a sticker you might see in shops. That is a means of certification. A certain rating on Zagat, for instance, would be a certification. You've achieved a certain level of certification as a means of demonstrating credibility. Longevity, you've been around for a while or you have a lot of institutional knowledge that makes you credible. Similarity is also a way of demonstrating credibility, that you have a lot in common with the users. So you're credible because you're like them or you know them. So those are points of credibility, ways that you show that you're a credible entity. The question then becomes, how do you demonstrate credibility in your content? And here are several ideas for how you demonstrate credibility in your content. If you have quality content over a long period of time, that demonstrates that you're credible. If you have reviews, awards, or kudos, that is a way that you can demonstrate credibility in your content. If you have quotes, that is another way. Partner affiliations. So once again, those two are basically the idea of endorsements, quotes, and partner affiliations. Expert contributions. So you are credible enough that an expert would take the time and house their content or what they have authored in your content itself. Also content from credible sources, so it might not just be expert contributions, it could be content from other organizations. A product history and a story, we have a long history of having relationships with our customers, or a product story is a way that you can demonstrate credibility in your content. And then also if you're in the product marketing side, If you have security or privacy cues, so HTTPS is one way knowing that it's secure. If you have like little emblems stating that you've met certain like McAfee security credentials, that is a way of demonstrating that you are a credible place to do business with. So that is how you demonstrate credibility in your content. Another way that you can use rhetoric to your advantage is basically the idea of logic. You want to make a strong argument and show good reasoning. You want to be valid. Your argument is good if your claim is true based on evidence, and users can understand why your argument is warranted, and it's something that makes sense to your users. So how do you use the idea of logic in your content? You want to have a claim, so you want to say, a value proposition, and you want to assert it to be true. So you want to make a claim about your offering. And then you want to give evidence to it. You want to say that it supports your claim and that your claim is supported. So facts, statistics, testimonials. And then a warrant. So it's why you make the claim based on your evidence. So your claim always needs to be warranted. In other words, the warrant explains why and how the data proves the claim. So the evidence supports this claim because blank. So that is a way that you can use logic as a way of creating a strong rhetoric of communicating to people. Another way that you can do it is through emotions. It's how you hold people's interest. You can gain their sympathies or you can motivate them to act, and you want to appeal to them in the right way. But also emotions are something that you want to handle with care, so you don't want to seem manipulative in any way, because that would make people not trust you as much. So sometimes when somebody pulls the heartstrings too much, you become skeptical or you feel like you're being manipulated. So you want to use emotions, but you don't want to be manipulative. So how do you use emotions as a rhetorical device? One of the reasons that we define different audiences is because you want to talk to each of them in a slightly different way, and in a way that communicates with them successfully. So you can use something called voice, tone, and style. So what are each? In thinking about each of these, actually, you want to think about your own voice and tone. And they change between something, your professional life, with your friends, and with your parents. How you talk to them will change. Your voice, your tone, and your style. And, you have the same personality, right? But your tone changes between different situations and when there's different purposes, all depending on your audience. And so you want to take this into account when you think about this. So voice is really, the personality or the feel of your content. And the tone is the mood conveyed through your words, your images, and in other content. So, the author of, say, a story would have a certain voice, right? If it's a first person, but their tone would change. So is this voice dark? Is it enjoyable? What is the actual tone and the mood conveyed through these words that this person is using? And then a style. So if you have a vivid word choice or imagery that's charged with emotion, that is something to take into account. And the difference between each of these, and these can sound somewhat similar, is a voice is a reflection of who you are, and tone is kind of a reflection of the audience's emotional state. But these all get very combined, so I wouldn't get too hung up on what the differences between each of these are. But this is basically to make you aware of the way that you use words, reflects a certain personality and a mood, an imagery that's charged with emotion. And so you want to be conscious of how you use your words based on your different audiences. Is all you really need to worry about this. So a really clear example of voice, tone, and style is a podcast called, it's from the makers of How Stuff Works. It's called Stuff You Should Know, and it features two hosts, Josh and Chuck. It's really entertaining. They have a unique style that is humorous, informative, not too nerdy or lofty. they talk about science in a very, very engaging, fun, practical way. And so it's, it has a certain style and tone versus if you read a scientific article or study in a journal. Those are two different ways to think about taking something like science or the topic of science and science education and how you use tone and style to make a difference based on your audience. So this is a style for the layman, where versus a scientific study in a journal would be for academics. So it's taking your audience into account and creating a style and a tone that appeals to them. And another way that you can use this in emotion is something like senses and associations. So one of these is sensory detail. So how does something look or sound or smell, taste or feel? You're using and you're evoking people's senses. And it triggers people's gut reactions. And also you can trigger people's gut reactions through associations. So words and images that people are familiar with that brings, say, a connotation or a feeling. So an example of this is Lindt Chocolate's website. You can almost taste it. You can see it. You can see this chef with a chef's hat, which brings a connotation of this is a professional. Somebody who has been making chocolate for a long time. This guy cares about his chocolate, and you can see it, and you can almost taste it. Another way of using rhetoric is something called identification, and this is a way to find common ground with your audience. And you want users to identify with you. And, one way to think about this, for instance, is the gap between President Obama and Mitt Romney when they were running. People felt like they couldn't relate to Mitt Romney. That was one of the critiques of him as a candidate. And so identification is really strong. Is he like us? And, another example of that in the presidential cycle was that people were much more, wanted to have a beer, they said, with George W. Bush more so than Al Gore. So identification can go on both ways, of course. But, people can identify with you because they're similar to you, so demographics, or they can identify with you because you hold similar values. So one is based on, they're just like me, they look like me, they sound like me, and another one is a little bit more, deep-rooted, so that, we are very similar at the value-based level. We believe in the same things at a gut level. So that is identification, and it's really important. And content is a way of having people identify with you a little bit more. So how do you apply that within your content? You can use personas and spokespersons, so kind of endearing characters. User-generated content is another way. Content that is created by customers or by users and is sent in is a way to show, hey, they're just like me. Cause content. So does the company have any values that they can express via something called cause marketing? That's a way of showing values that if a company is giving back in a meaningful way, then I might identify with that company because they're doing charity work that is based on my values. Your brand story is another way to do this. Case studies. And just general storytelling is another way. So another easy example of rhetoric is something called repetition. And we want to make the same point a number of times. And we want to make these messages appear in our web content because we want them to repeat. Hearing is believing, and if people hear it over and over again, they're more likely to believe it. You want to be careful in not repeating too much or repeating the exact same thing so many times that you're kind of this one-trick pony. What you want to do is repeat and echo kind of the same messages in different ways throughout your content. So you want to repeat, you don't want to repeat to the point where people get sick of it and you have nothing else to add except for this one thing. But you want to kind of echo, like I said, those same themes over and over again throughout your content, because hearing over and over again is more likely to let people believe. Using opportune moments, we've talked about the right timing, and that's really applicable in something like messaging, in rhetoric. You don't want to ask for too much, too soon, or too often. So you don't want to bombard people because they'll tune us out. Think about telemarketers, for instance. If they call you over and over again, you'll obviously just not pick up your phone. But also, we don't want to ask people to do things they're not ready for. So you want to take that into account. If you are part of a political campaign and they ask you, you say, hey, I might be interested in learning about this person a little bit more, they're not going to send you right away to knock on doors. That wouldn't make sense. That would be too much, too hard of an ask. You might eventually get there, but it doesn't make sense right now. The second one is to ask clearly, because people won't react properly at the opportune moment if you don't ask something clearly. They'll misinterpret, or they won't follow through. It might be too complex for them to do it. And you also want to use opportune moments to react promptly to something like a crisis. If you don't, you'd lose trust. So just as much as there's rules for opportune moments, there's also rules for inopportune moments. And you can do all this via something called a calls to action. And we're going to talk about this a lot in the second half of this course, and especially in things like advertising. It's really a clear and concise invitation to get involved or get started. So here's an example of a project management system called Basecamp, which is very popular. And you can see it says in that green button, it says See Plans and Pricing. That is, very short. It's very concise. It's very clear. Another example would be like Get Started Now. You can note it didn't say pay us money right now. You didn't get taken right away to a credit card input page, because that's that single prompt for what the audience is ready for at this time. Now, when they see the plans and pricing, when they see what people have to offer, that might be an appropriate call to action at that time to enter your information for your credit card. Right now, you're just taking into account the idea that the audience just might want to learn more. You're not pushing them too much. You're not just making this completely inappropriate in a way. And a good example of calls to actions and how to find them is usually they're in the form of a button on a website. That kind of red button or a green button. And we'll actually talk about red buttons and green buttons and how to even test things like buttons in the second half of this course. So now we've talked about a whole bunch of different rhetorical devices. The question becomes, when do you use each of them? Now, last week we talked about 3 different phases of a campaign. We talked about the phase 1, which is raising awareness. We talked about phase 2, which is becoming liked and trusted. And we talked about phase 3, which is motivating, inspiring, and helping people to take action. So let's go through each of these rhetorical devices that we talked about. The first one is credibility. And, credibility is really used well when you want to raise awareness and when you want to become liked and trusted. When you get to something like phase 3, where we're talking about motivating and getting people to take action, you already want to have credibility. And in fact, that goes back to like what I said, the call to action and making sure you're asking things at the right time. If you don't have enough credibility and you're in phase 3 and you're asking people to take action, they are not going to take action. They don't know who you are or why they should trust you, which is what we need to accomplish in phase 1 and phase 2. So credibility, you want to use that device in phase 1 and phase 2. Logic. Logic makes sense at any time. It makes sense when you want to raise awareness. Logically, that makes sense. You want to become liked and trusted. Logic is good in terms of gaining trust because you're using facts, using reasoning, and that prompts people to be trusted. And also, logically, why would I have the rational self-interest? Why would I actually care enough? Do you have a good enough reason for me to take action right now? So logic is a rhetorical device that you can use at any phase. Emotion is also something you can use in any phase. Raising awareness through emotion makes a lot of sense. If you want to talk about any campaign, any kind of cause campaign, they'll usually use emotion at the beginning. So something like feeding the hungry would be, you always see pictures, very emotional pictures there. Becoming liked and trusted. Trust is an emotion in a way. So that is very emotional. And if you want to get people to take action, people will react based on their gut with those things. And so you want to use emotion there. So emotion as a rhetorical device makes sense in all three phases. Identification, they're just like me. It doesn't necessarily make sense when you are trying to raise awareness because if you don't know that the product exists, you're not going to be able to identify with it. How do I know that we have something in common if I don't know it exists? So in phase 2, becoming liked and trusted, the idea of somebody being similar to you, it really works with becoming liked and trusted. Identification also works in phase 2 when you're asking people to take action. A lot of the times you'll see emails from a persona who is kind of pitching the idea of you to take action. And characters are used because you identify with them. Repetition makes sense when you want to raise awareness and when you want to motivate people to take action. It's not necessarily something that helps you become liked and trusted, per se. It kind of backfires sometimes when you're using repetition too many times to become trusted or liked, certainly liked. I would also argue, that checkbox might make sense in phase 2 in terms of becoming trusted because in some cases, when you repeat, people are more likely to trust the idea and that it exists and that it's true if they hear it over and over again. You would want to use that in a way where they're hearing it from multiple angles, from multiple types of people. So it's not just coming from one person over and over again. That is a lot likely to build trust. But if you hear the same thing from multiple sources, it's more likely to be trustworthy. So that's why phase 2 is not checked. There are some ways that it does and it doesn't. And then the opportune moment. You're waiting for that time to really motivate, inspire, and help to take action. So it makes sense in phase 3. Really, you're waiting for that moment to kind of kick things into gear. And so that's why it makes sense in phase 3, because you want to use the opportune moment to motivate, inspire, and help to take action. That's the purpose of the opportune moment. So that is rhetoric at a glance, and that is how you use rhetoric in your content. So 2 points of order before I finished. First, since this is the final week before we present, what I want to do this Thursday at 8 p.m., I'm going to volunteer to be available in our GoTo training room to do a how to use GoTo training to present session. And I'll also have a Q&A on the midterm itself. So if you have any questions for the project as a whole, this would be your time to ask those questions either as a group or as individually, and I'll make myself available. So this is totally optional, but if you want to try out the tool in presentation mode before you have to present on the 26th, this will be your chance. So ideally, one person from each group would be able to attend this session, and we'll just talk and answer any questions on how to use the GoTo training tool in presentation mode. And that way your group has someone who knows how to advance the slides and so on as you present. And also, like I said, we can just use this session also as a general Q&A session on the midterm. since I know it's your last opportunity to ask any major questions before we present the project, and before the project is due as a whole, both the actual proposal Word document and then the presentation itself. So as you prepare, as you finish the project up, if you have any outstanding questions, need any clarity, or anything of that like, this would be a good opportunity to do so. So that'll be this Thursday at 8 p.m. Like I said, totally up to you, but it could be a good use of your time, or at least have one person from your group available at that time to rehearse and ask any questions on behalf of the group. And then also next week is week 6, so the midterm projects are due. So we'll be meeting next Thursday, June 26th at 8 p.m. And by that time, one person from your group should have submitted the proposal document. And so in order to give you the proper amount of time and the energy to finish up this midterm project this week for this module, we're not having any assignments due beyond the discussion board posts that you finished up on Thursday, or will finish up on Tuesday, I'm sorry. And then for week 6, there will be no additional assignments beyond the midterm project itself. And that way, between this week and a half of just completely uninterrupted midterm project work, you'll be able to focus specifically on the midterm projects and do it justice. So I look forward to seeing one of you for each group on this Thursday. Like I said, up to you, but could be a good use of your time. And then I'm really looking forward to week 6, the midterm projects, and seeing what everybody has come up with. So I'll see you at both of those times.